I think we all know what the main topic this weekend will be. Will Red Bull be a shadow of its former self or not? Although some of you might argue that that's been the case since Imola last year. In all seriousness, what a place to resume operations after a change of leadership. Laurent Mekies leads the senior team into the second half of the season around Spa, the track in which Max Verstappen calls one of his homes. We have seen many burns from the stern in which he actually goes on to win the darn thing. So you might be thinking, well, why can't he pull a few surprises here? Well, reality is set in, and based on Max's own words, the fight toward McLaren is basically a done deal. Red Bull do have upgrades coming for the Belgian Grand Prix, as well as the Hungarian Grand Prix, so it's not like Red Bull's standing still. But I think the topic of 2026 might start to come to the fore, and if the team really wants to keep Max Verstappen, if he says that it's probably time to stop thinking about this year, then it's probably time to stop thinking about this year. Plus, the new team principal is reportedly having the desire to introduce new procedures which could offer up a much easier Friday, thanks to some updated simulator processes, which may mean Max is more likely a car under him by the time we get to FP1. Which is just as well, since there is only going to be that, and then we go into spring qualifying. It's also quite a precarious race in the sense that this will be a really important barometer to see where Red Bull exactly is right now. This being a track which Max Verstappen enjoys, and it's been the first Grand Prix since Christian Horner's ousting. We are all keen to see what exactly will happen. Are we going to be seeing a Red Bull racing that we've been seeing for the last 20 plus years or so? Or is this going to be a new, technologically driven, engineer-focused Red Bull racing? Something that may not be as exciting or sexy or boldly breaking rules and convention like we've seen since 2005. We might be getting something more conventional. But quite frankly, Red Bull needs a little bit of convention. It needs a bit of time in the corner just to be quiet. Also, I'm pretty sure that they want these upgrades to actually be good and provide some meaningful boosts to Max's performance, which may mean he can challenge for a couple more podiums more likely. But the very big sense that we've heard from the entire season is that Red Bull do bring upgrades, they do something, but in Max's own words, they just tend to be not enough. Not quite there to provide anything, which may mean they can close in on their rivals. That's the main thing that Max has observed, that throughout this entire regulation cycle, they started off really strong after getting the weight down in 2022, and it peaked, and then eventually they just sort of stopped progressing as much as they would like to, and everyone else caught up and surged past. But I think we are going to be getting a Red Bull racing which is going to be looking inwards toward itself and how it itself could be better, instead of looking out to other teams and then shouting at them that they're doing something illegal with tyre water, and then getting the FIA to slap them down, so that means they don't have to innovate themselves. I don't think we're going to be seeing that anymore. The days of constant protests and spending €2,000 per protest are over, quite frankly. Because according to this piece from Race Fans, Max is seemingly understanding of the team's plight right now, and in recent interviews he's been quite circumspect about the challenges facing them. Him going as far as effectively saying, it could be worse. Him commenting that at least the RB21 is able to fight for podiums and not pinned to the back. Yeah, try telling that to Yuki Tsunoda, mate. But this particular section of that interview is indicating to me that maybe 2026 is a place where Max will be staying at Red Bull, him prepared to wait it out and see where everything lies. So here's this for your consideration. Ahem. 2026 is completely different, and something completely different that you need from the car. Because the previous generation of cars, we had the opposite. We were off in the beginning, and then toward the end, we actually made it work. So they're recalling, Max, the previous generation, that's 2017 through 2021, where Red Bull, they were okay, they were middling, they got back up to third place in the Constructors, but by the end of it, as we all know, they were the fastest car. It's rare for a team to remain dominant throughout an entire one of those. You can get rise and falls, and Max gets it. Also, it's kind of saying that this year is a little bit of a write-off in regards to McLaren. The best Red Bull can do is to ensure that Tsunoda has a car he can work with, and both have one that tangle with Mercedes and Ferrari, and maybe snatch a win in the right circumstances. It's a bit of a warning to the team, yes, but it's quite a soft one. It is, again, far less aggressive or as pushy. You do get the feeling that he is actually being heard, and that the team are indeed going, yes, Max, absolutely. We really want you to stay and be part of our regeneration. This could be key. This could be very crucial. What happens in Spa and Hungary, and then into the second half of the season. And then we go to Ferrari, because we're all going to be looking at them as well. Of course, we're expecting McLaren to not lose their lead suddenly. They've got parts coming for Spa as well, even though they don't actually need the parts. Please stop. But the Scuderia suspension at the back has some noticeable modifications which has caught people by surprise, in that it's a major change to be undertaking for just half a season before everything changes up again, and that type of model may not be suitable for next year's aerodynamics. In any case, that supposed test around Mugello was more than just your standard wheeling out the car, send it round a couple of times and then see what happens. It was also more than just your standard filming day. It was bringing in some brand new parts of the rear suspension and going quite considerably far in terms of implementation that is actually relevant to the season. And also, the results proved to be quite fruitful. They brought in everybody. They brought in Zhou Guanyu, they brought in Antonio Giovinazzi, and both Hamilton and Leclerc. Everybody got to have a go. And also, if this is accurate according to Scuderia Ferrari fans, Ferrari undertook some really considerable means to get best results, because they actually made modifications to the Mugello circuit, with like cones or barriers or something, I don't actually have pictures, that maybe better reflected some corners that may be coming up. So that means they can get some detailed pinning down of what their findings are for the suspension, because even though Mugello was nice, and we did go there for the 2020 Tuscan Grand Prix, it's not exactly representative of what we're getting going forward. But the question is, though, is it going to work, I hear you say? Well, I mean, it's got to work. Or else you're going to get two really grumpy drivers who desperately wanted to kick Red Bull while they were down, and in the midst of a potential internal power struggle as to where Ferrari goes forward from this year. Because you get Charles Leclerc wanting to battle on with the 2025 car, thinking there might be something in it. And then you got Lewis Hamilton thinking about next year and maybe getting the slip onto Charles Leclerc and establishing the SF26 to be a car that is more to his liking. And in terms of the direction of development, the supposed UK Ferrari-based rumours, Lewis is, being busy in the behind-the-scenes stuff. He ideally wants to get his DNA onto the car, and then you get the second in command at Ferrari, Jerome D'Ambrosio, walking that back, saying, no, we want a car that works for both drivers. But you do got to remember, Jerome came from Mercedes along with Lewis, so this might be a little bit of diplomacy going on. It might be genuine, actual means to make sure both drivers are at optimal pace, but it is a very interesting thing to say, and then the higher-ups at Ferrari walking it back. This part could be a game changer, it could be nothing. This rear suspension could easily be a nothing burger in that it doesn't really produce anything, but if it does do something, it might be able to cure a lot of the ills that both drivers have been having in having a really slidey rear end. That maybe it provides them some stability, it provides Lewis some more confidence, might be able to bolden up his end game, which has actually started to come back really well, and it might not be able to get a podium this weekend because the Mercedes might be quite strong in the cooler conditions and the cooler climbs. Russell really likes this track, and then the McLarens, well, less said about them. We all know what's going to happen. But if Ferrari can at least be competitive, almost being in touching distance of a podium, and then building up from there in Hungary, that could be curious going into the second half and in the constructors. I think the best that they can probably hope for is at least they can close the gap to McLaren by at least a little bit. And speaking of gaps, Pirelli is bringing in something we talked about on the channel a while ago. Gaps between compounds to spice up the action a little bit. For the first time, there will be 2 steps between the hard tyre and the medium tyre, the C1 and C3 respectively. Now, for those of you who know your rubber, this is quite a big deal because the gap between the C1 and C3 tyres is quite monumental, and also nobody likes the C1 tyre. It is the outcast of the entire group because nothing ever comes good from having the C1 on. It's incredibly dull, it doesn't really do anything, and all the drivers hate it. And then you got the C3, which seems to be the most beloved tyre out of all of them, since it's slap bang in the middle, even though the C6 is a thing, but we don't really talk about that anymore. And even though Pirelli is claiming the choice has got nothing to do with them artificially amping up the action or making things more unpredictable, but they're saying it won't do that, it means they are totally going to do that, they so want this. But it's more to do with correcting a situation the company has found itself in, where the C2 through 4 are really close to one another in performance this year, and that's resulted in one-stop strategies being the norm, or the team's ideal choice. And I think it is quite obvious that having less pit stops means there's less jeopardy, there's less strategy, there's less intrigue involved in a Formula 1 race. I mean, unless, of course, you get a safety car, that might add another extra pit stop, and then you've got maybe a red flag, which could be a pit stop in situ. There are variables that can make a standard one-stop exciting, but come on. A standard 2-stop, that's much more exciting, because there's a lot more things that can easily go wrong. The teams hate it, we love it. But yeah, the gap between the hard and the medium makes a one-stop less obvious. I wouldn't be surprised if some people do try and do it, because we did see people brave it out like Alonso and Russell and it being able to work out for them. But then again, if it's going to be quite cool and maybe overcast, that might make it less likely to activate those tyres. You see what I mean here? It might make the C1 completely unusable if it's too cold. And since you actually have to use two different compounds, then it might be meaning they have to hold back softs in qualifying, so you might get mediums and softs, which means you'd definitely be having a 2-stop, or maybe even some people a 3-stop. Oh, okay, I'm really curious to see where this goes, because if it does work out, I wouldn't be surprised if Pirelli uses this at a couple of other circuits later in the year. You might be wondering, well, why didn't they go with C1, C2, C4? So that means there's a huge gap between the medium tyre and the soft tyre. Well, again, qualifying, if they used all the C4s, there wouldn't be any left for the race, and you'd have the C1 and C2, and you'd definitely have a one-stop strategy, no questions asked. It would certainly not really make any difference in terms of the excitement level or jeopardy. But honestly, I think it's a good idea. And now this is the part of the video where I'm going to be talking about what the weather conditions will be like around Spa-Francorchamps, but unfortunately, that is pretty much trying to find hen's teeth, well, at a place where chickens do not exist. It has its own little microclimate, and even though the temperature's saying it might not even get above 20 degrees Celsius, which is something to note, and Mercedes will very much like that, and that 20% chance of rain on all the days, that maybe Sunday might be the driest, Friday's looking likely to be raining, you can't really trust the forecast even today, and that really, you just gotta be there, look up and go, oh, it looks like rain. Yeah, better get the brollies up, and then you just gotta pray. That's Spa for you, and that's why people partly love it, because it's just chaos, it's excitement, it's history, it's heritage, and I still don't understand why it's being alternated with other circuits. I just don't understand. It might make it hard to predict who's going to be in the top 5, but we F1 content creators are going to try anyway because we are algorithmically obliged to. So okay, who's got a chance of scoring something today? Well, I'm certainly thinking Fernando will spring a surprise again. Ever since the Imola upgrade that totally did not have Adrian Newey breathe on them, he's dragged that car into the points very regularly. And had his car not failed in Monaco, Aston would be right behind Sauber right now, and Fernando the lead scorer. It's still weird to say, isn't it, that Sauber are ahead of Aston Martin and the majority of the midfield, that they're on a roll here. And providing Aston Martin give him a good strategy due to the nature of Spa having a really long lap, the longest on the calendar, then we might be able to see Fernando spring a few surprises on them and being able to maybe get a cheeky P7, P8 or something, which is what Aston Martin's team principal Andy Cowell believes is the peak of the car right now. I believe that Aston Martin said that they're not bringing any more updates this year, that the Imola upgrade was the biggest one, they assessed what was worth it, and it's ultimately decided that they're looking to next year. But I still think they could be on for some points. They are still very much in it in terms of the midfield contest, and that Fernando could easily be the one to bring home the bacon for them. Whereas with Lance Stroll, I don't know, man, because, we saw that he can still score points, but last year's Belgian Grand Prix wasn't great for him. And also Spa rewards low drag cars and straight line speed, which means that Williams will feature here. And Carlos has endured a very bruising run, and he insists the pace is in the car, so this could be a good opportunity for him to lead the team to, maybe P8, P9 or something. Kind of like how Alex managed to do around Silverstone and provide something to the team, which means that they can at least hold on to 5th in some meaningful way. But again, I don't think it's going to be a barnstormer here where Carlos is going to get into the top 5 or something like that. All of the other teams ahead of them have developed enough to keep Williams out of that ballpark for the rest of the season. Yeah, Williams are bringing a small update, so there might be a small hope that you'll get into the lower half of the points and just being able to eke out that little bit more each time. And I also have a small hope that this race could net Kimi's first points since Canada and end his awful streak and maybe get Toko to talk more nicely about his chances of remaining there. Because the W16 does respond well in cooler climates, Spa is cool and cool. And Mercedes' pit work is much better than the last couple of seasons, and if Antonelli keeps it tidy and nails the tyre strategy, I do think a low top 10 finish is realistic. I mean, quite frankly, he'll be happy with any points, or at least just finish the race for once. But anyway, those are my guesses for the lower points. What about the bigger points? The top 5 predictions? Well, here they are. And I will go differently this time. I want to try some things out, so we will start from 5th and then finish with 1st. So do keep watching. In 5th place, I have one Max Verstappen, and yeah, he does call Spa a home race, sure, but he is also keeping his expectations thoroughly realistic. I doubt we are going to be seeing another barnstormer. That is not something the RB21 is capable of, honestly. Like I said earlier, Max has admitted that the team will probably not get to anywhere near where McLaren is, and that the odds of his maintaining the world title are slim to none, because there are lingering weaknesses in low and medium speed corners. And sure, there are very, very long straights, such as the Kemmel Straight and what have you, that maybe sees the RB21 gain some massive top speed and catch up lap time that way. The high speed stuff, maybe. Sector 3 might be really good and might be able to get them into Q3 fairly decently, so long as they don't meet traffic. But having said that though, according to various sources, the car does go off on softer tyres in cooler conditions, and if we do get overcast conditions and then the rain comes along and then makes the track extremely cold, it might make qualifying SQ3 in particular that little bit more dicey. Red Bull do have stuff to show off though, and Max doesn't really need that long to exploit a brand new change which may work in his favour. And if Laura Mecki's plans to really get a lot more things developed before Friday actually pays off, then it might mean we will see a Max Verstappen higher up the order in FP1 and not just languishing near the bottom, hoping for a miracle. However, the team still remains dependent on him for points for the time being, and strategy means that it's somewhat compromised. That I don't know what will happen with Yuki Tsunoda. He's an even bigger question mark than Max. But I do think Red Bull are behind Mercedes a couple of tenths or so, and that maybe Ferrari could get a cheeky undercut, which will undermine Red Bull even more. Because let's not forget, Ferrari are the fastest at the moment in terms of pit stops. They currently hold this year's record. They could spring a few surprises as long as their strategies work out. So I wouldn't be surprised that we are going to be seeing a gritty drive from Max Verstappen, and I think 5th place is the minimum that he could possibly be getting. We might see a few surprises, especially if the weather changes unexpectedly. Max will be ready for the challenge, but as of now, I think he'll be propping up the top 5. And then in 4th place, I've got Lewis Hamilton. Let's be real here. Even for the most ardent of Team LH fan, it's been a bit of a slog this year, hasn't it? It's been a huge reality check. The dream that many people hoped for has not transpired as of yet. But I do think that maybe these updates that Ferrari have been working on is a very serious moment. Maybe the team has found something that could provide both drivers, including Lewis, a little bit more stability. Because as of now, in terms of high-speed corners, Lewis has said time and time again, he just simply not likes it at all. Although having said that though, in terms of overall points that he's accrued this year, he's not that far off what he's been able to do in 2024, so it's not exactly been a major step down for him. It's been a reality check, sure, but it's not been a crashing descent into despair. If the tweak works, then Lewis will have a more predictable platform in which be able to develop in FP1 and then in the sprint qualifying, and if they can get the setup right there, we get something akin to China where he got sprint pole, they can just leave it well enough alone and then go from there. And then maybe it might be able to really underpin the end game that we've been able to see from Lewis in recent races. You know, the whole time where Lewis suddenly comes alive in the last 10 or 20 laps or so? We might be starting to see more and more of it as the season progresses, especially if the car remains true to what he expects. But let's also remember that he is a Spa specialist. He enjoys this circuit. He has won it multiple times, including last year. And if Ferrari can get some really good top-end grunt especially, and therefore being able to maximize the Kemmel Straight, I certainly think they'd be able to pip off a couple of places in that regard, in that just using DRS, using the top speed, and being able to get them going into the twisty section of Sector 2. It may depend on them using a two-stop strategy and maybe having to hold back a set of softs, because the C1 tyre has proven to be very difficult for the Ferrari to fire up, which could be an issue. So if Ferrari are really serious in getting Lewis a podium, they might have to maybe not think about the hard tyre unless these upgrades allow them to activate that tyre a little bit faster. But until then, we won't know for sure. It may cost them a couple of seconds in terms of if they have to use the hard tyre in getting it back up to temperature. That might be really crucial, especially if they're trying to get some undercuts, because it would completely negate them. I think Ferrari could do with a bit of a morale boost, and I think this could be a track where they might get something. It's sure certainly going to be another P4 for Lewis, but at least it's one that might be a little bit closer to 3rd place, George Russell. Because his time in Formula 1 and racing around the Spa-Francorchamps circuit for George, it's been nothing short of dramatic. 2021, getting on the front row, and then barely racing before then getting Williams their last ever podium thus far, currently. That might change, but that is their most recent podium, that particularly infamous race, and George the one to get it. And then, of course, what happened last year with the W15, the Mercedes 1-2, that never was, that Drive to Survive somehow completely skated over and just made it that it actually did happen. But let's remember, post-race scrutiny completely scuppered the dream realization that George had won at Spa. through a humongously Herculean effort in making that one-stop strategy work and the tyres not bugging out on him. And let's not forget, Lewis was free to race him. He could have overtaken him, but he didn't. But let's not forget that George has also said time and time again, akin to what Lewis has been saying about the high-speed steering issue at Ferrari, also that Mercedes is at the mercy of the weather, that if the temperatures are really hot, then their prospects are not. But it is not going to be hot this weekend. It'll be much cooler, and if it is overcast, then I think that Mercedes is absolutely going to love those C3 tyres, and might be able to get something out of the C1s after all. It's really, really interesting here, and certainly gives me some suspicion that George is on for another podium. They're also going to be, I think, bringing some little aero tweaks here or there, which might be able to help out George as well, and Kimi to maybe get a double points finish. So if anyone's going to be trying a one-stop strategy, it's definitely going to be George. It certainly could bring him a little bit closer to Max Verstappen in third place in the championship, best of the rest and all that. Now we come to second place. Which of the two McLarens is it going to be? Because, yes, it is the two McLarens, and I do believe in second place it is going to be one Lando Norris. Yes, of course, back-to-back triumphs in Austria and his home race in Silverstone had been absolutely monumental in terms of upping Lando's psyche and his own sense of confidence. This has been absolutely wonderful to see, that he is back in the room and that he's more than happy to bring the challenge to Oscar Piastri in the second half of the season. He is in a very good place right now, whereas Oscar Piastri's position is that little bit more shaky. The veneer of the last few races, the last couple of months, have started to wear off a little bit, little bits of it just flicking off, whereas Lando has been the one to be able to go like, flick, 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 because after Silverstone saying that these are memories that he'll bring with him forever, that is a very, very deep sentiment and something that he will cherish and gather strength from. Yes, of course, the first half of 2025 has been full of highs and a lot of lows, some really, really big lows, but those are right behind him. And again, the Red Bull Ring, Silverstone, completely purged it into history. And also Spa is one of his favourite circuits and technically a home circuit since his family does in part hail from Belgium. Also, let's not forget, the MCL39 is coming with supposedly an upgraded floor, something they tested in Silverstone and have now refined to here. So I do think they are going to be smacking the competition left, right and centre. It is going to be another barnstormer of papaya matters. So, okay, Law, why are you pipping him for second then? Well, there are two factors here, because you get it, it's like 2 second. Yeah, it's relevant. It's continuous. Firstly, Piastri's calmer style might help him out over the long lap of Spa, because over the course of that entire distance, the tyres could easily go off over a single lap. And Norris's more direct style, I think, might be hampering him in that regard, especially maybe with the C4s. Because he does tend to lean on the front, really get some turning in compared to Oscar with being a little bit more smooth. It also doesn't help Lando that I do think that this circuit and the next one are places where Oscar really, really shines and did shine. Second, Spa's sprint package means that you only get 1 hour to really get things dialed in. And Lando does tend to take a little bit of time at some circuits to be able to hone in exactly what setup he needs. And that sometimes in sprint weekends, he doesn't get to his ideal soft spot. And that maybe the sprint might provide a little bit less fruit for him. And that will be very important between the sprint race and qualifying one for him to be able to refine things. But again, time will be very much up against him. There won't be any more practice after FP1. And he's also said the constant development drive to make sure you get the optimal car is something that he finds mentally and physically exhausting. Something that is very much a limiting factor. I do expect another close intra-team duel. I do think it is not going to be a cakewalk from Oscar, but I do think the Australian has that little bit more of an edge than Lando. It's going to be within like 5 seconds or something. It's going to be close. Certainly enough to keep the title fight boiling on for another race. And yeah, there you go. I've got Oscar Piastri in first place because, yeah, even though Oscar's cool, calm confidence was rattled a little bit around Silverstone, he's still surely smarting from that 10-second penalty, which he still thinks is a little bit unjust. But he is, instead of stewing over it, just simply festering, getting mad about it, he's taking that initial frustration and forging it into maybe winning races further on into the season. And like I just mentioned, I do think that this race weekend and the next race weekend are going to be very happy hunting grounds for the Australian. This is something that is going to be really stamping in before we go to the summer break that Oscar Piastri is still in charge. And if he is fully converting, even if McLaren get 2 1-2s, Oscar will be very much back in the game with a 20-point plus lead. It's that important to him. Because if he doesn't convert and then Lando beats him here, then Lando will take over the championship. So yeah, if Piastri does lose out here, then it's not the end of the world. There are still plenty of races to be had, but I do have a lot of confidence to believe that Oscar will be able to do the business. Because Hungary was a turning point for him last year and the year before that in terms of how people defined him. Tyre management, that's become a bugbear in 23, and then by 24, it was all gone. I know we're not talking about Hungary, we're talking about Spa, because Spa was very much a big turning point in his career as well. Because let's not forget, he got on the front row next to Max, he actually fought him hard. Amidst the Mercedes 1-2 and the disqualification drama, Oscar was steaming in right behind Lewis and George. He only missed out on that win by half a second or something. So therefore, I think he knows the rhythm of this place rather well. And also, even though there are forecasts of rain and it's very hard to predict, at the moment it's looking very low in terms of percentages. So it's a very drama-free race where there is not much chance of a safety car really getting in the way, and you don't get a repeat of what happened last time, even though I don't think he would repeat the same actions. It would mean that you just have a very simple race, a dry but slightly cool race, where Piastri can maybe reassert some ground in terms of the championship. But I am very sure that he is wanting to make a statement win here and at the next one, so it's going to be a very interesting time for both McLaren drivers in where they stand at the moment. Norris's tweaked suspension is really working out for him. Piastri prefers the older suspension, and it is providing McLaren a little bit of a logistical headache, but hey, that's what Oscar wants, and they're all about parity, right? So, just give them parity. But before we head into the summer break, who have been the winners and losers of the first half of the season? To find out who I think makes the cut in those respective categories, watch this video next, straight after this one.